disinformation. Specifically, in this video presentation, I will expose one of society's main disinformation tactics, and that consists of changing the causative elements of different events, or creating an event that doesn't exist and then adding a causative element that also doesn't exist in order to rationalize its decisions based on its convenient delusion. Shortly, just one of the many tactics of disinformation that society uses to build its convenient delusional system. This is one of the most used examples in society's delusional system, and that comprises the non-existent causative elements that resulted in the non-existent mental health issue that society desperately wants me to have in order to rationalize its atrocities and many other convenient delusions besides this one. So here we have Group A. Group A comprises cannabis smokers. And Group A represents the group of people that smoke cannabis. Group B is a subgroup of Group A. This means that a small percentage of Group A Group B represents a small percentage of Group A. And Group B represents the people who smoke cannabis and developed mental illnesses or had mental illnesses. Or developed mental illnesses after smoking cannabis, or had mental illnesses or predisposition to developing mental illnesses before smoking cannabis. Now, once again, Group B is not equal to Group A. Group B represents only a small percentage of Group A. To put this into perspective, it is stated that smoking cannabis can increase the chances of developing a mental health issue compared to someone who doesn't smoke cannabis. And the statistics differ based on each and every study, but generally someone who smokes cannabis is 2 or even 3 times more likely to develop mental health issues. Most studies put this number somewhere around twice as likely. So most of the studies show that smoking cannabis increases the chances of developing a mental health illness to about twice the chances that a non-smoker would have. And this mostly happens to people who smoke cannabis regularly. So, once again, Group A is not equal to Group B. Group B represents a small percentage of Group A. To explain this, to illustrate how small of a percentage Group B is, on average, about 1%, well, maybe a little bit more than 1%, somewhere between 1 and 2%, but closer to 1% of the general population, so about 1 in 100 people, develop a psychotic mental illness. That's 1 in 100, that's 1%. Now, cannabis smokers are about twice as likely, but let's not use twice, let's use a bigger number than the average that is found in the studies. Let's use 3 times. So that would mean that 3% of cannabis users develop mental illnesses, while only 1% of the general population develops psychotic mental illnesses. So that means that Group B represents 3% of the population of Group A. That means that roughly 1 in 33 people who smoke cannabis will go on to develop a psychotic mental illness. 1 in 33. So for every 33 members of Group A, 1 of them is also part of Group B. So now that you have, now that this statistic is known to you, if one person smokes cannabis, the chances of developing a mental illness are 1 in 33. 1 in 33. That means that smoking cannabis does not result in developing a mental health illness. However, it increases the chances of developing a psychotic mental health issue. But for 97% of the people who smoke cannabis, that is false. 97% of them do not develop any mental health issue, any psychotic mental health issue. Only 3% do. 3% of the people who smoke cannabis develop mental health issues. So that means that group A is not equal to group B. So we have here the claim, cannabis smokers develop mental illnesses. Based on statistics, we know that this is false. Cannabis smokers do not develop mental health issues. A small percentage, a very small percentage of cannabis users develop mental illnesses. Only 3%. 32 out of 33 people who smoke cannabis do not develop a psychotic mental health issue. Now, how do we apply this? So this is common sense. This is how disinformation works. How do we apply this to this situation? So society's disinformation looks as follows. They said, we want Paul to have a mental health issue. Paul smoked cannabis. Therefore, Paul has a mental health issue because he smoked cannabis. That is false. And I have just proved it. Why is that false? Because that is not how you diagnose mental health issues. If someone smokes cannabis, you can only state that someone smokes cannabis, not that they have a mental health issue. So what society did, it took its delusional system, tens and tens of stories, so many theories of false stories reinforced by more false stories, and they stated they must be the result of mental illness, even though they're not. So they took the false theft accusation, the false sexual assault and violence accusation, the many defaming claims, negative claims that portray the extremely negative behavior, even in the cases in which it is not criminal. There are many types of false stories that are extremely negative and they are harming my reputation and honor and destroying my identity. They are criminal defamation committed on a global stage. Now, society took all of that and claimed that the only possible cause would be that Paul has a mental health issue. And then they went through my life and they checked for a causative element and they found smoking cannabis. So they claimed smoking cannabis must have resulted in a mental health issue, and that mental health issue caused Paul to say and do all these extremely negative things. However, now we know that that is false, and it's not how we diagnose mental health issues. So as far as anyone is aware, based on common sense, smoking cannabis did not result in developing any mental health issues. And this right here, this type of disinformation was present many times over and over again throughout society's delusional system. So this is number one. I'll prepare number two and continue with the presentation. Closer look to point one of this presentation. So this is part two of the video. In this segment of this video presentation, I will present another similar disinformation tactic that has been used extensively throughout the last 6-7 years in society's disinformation campaign. The concept is similar. Society pretends that a causative element that doesn't exist results in a specific outcome. However, the structure of this disinformation tactic is slightly different. In this case, outcome B is something that is already known. Outcome B is something that doesn't change. It is not the disinformation aspect of this structure, it is the final result. The disinformation aspect is here. It is the causative element. What causes outcome B? In this extremely simplified proof of concept like example, I used letters to illustrate this. So element A can result in cause B, but element C can also result in outcome B. And there could be other elements that can also result in outcome B. However, for the person who wants to create the disinformation, only element A is convenient for them to result in outcome B. Anything else is not convenient. So they want that to be true. As a result, they simply ignore all the other possible causes that result in outcome B and simply state that cause A must be true and cause A resulted in outcome B. This is a simple disinformation tactic, and it is relatively easy to apply in many real-life scenarios. However, in this video I will focus on society's disinformation campaign, and I will use the same example as last time, the society's convenient delusion in which I supposedly have a mental health issue. In reality, I never had any mental health issue, psychotic or non-psychotic. However, the psychotic type of mental health issue is what society wants me to have in order for its convenient delusions to seem real and for society to be able to rationalize its dehumanization and to reject the existence of its criminal defamation. So that being said, how did society do that? In 2017, in late spring, early summer, the environment necessary for the creation of this phenomenon was mostly already created. It already existed. In the local community and in a few secondary communities that were all linked to the main high school community where this phenomenon started, there had been a series of events which resulted in disinformation and the conditioning of that local community to exhibit psychopathic behavior toward me. This has been explained in one of my reports, and it's not the main topic of this video. However, it is important to be aware of it in order to understand the context. So at that time, there were a series of false stories made up in that local community. Some of these false stories represented crimes punishable by prison. In terms of crimes, I had been accused of stealing photos and trying to sell them, and of sexually assaulting and beating up someone. Now, these two false accusations were central to maintaining that environment and extending it to the rest of the world, and that was done through an illegal government intervention, but that's also slightly off topic considering the main subject of this video, the disinformation tactic. So what society did was try to rationalize its decision to create that government to rationalize that government intervention. So society and government wanted to rationalize that government intervention and be able to say that it would have been correct, or it would have been justified. Now, first, it is crucial to mention that government intervention was illegal regardless if I would have been mentally ill or not. It was illegal and it violated my fundamental human rights, and it functionally legalized crimes against me to the extent that it was 100% impossible for me to obtain justice, which resulted in people committing the respective crimes over and over again. So that's also a secondary topic, but it's good to be aware of it. However, based on at the time there were multiple series of different disinformation tactics used. So disinformation is not just one tactic applied to one situation. It is a complex phenomenon and a complex, sometimes very well planned course of actions in order to result into a specific outcome. And that's what it did. It made it seem as if that illegal deal that violated my fundamental human rights, the Constitution, the law, the international law, the national law, it violated everything. It made it seem as if it would be something normal, something that should be passed and that should be justified. Now, in order to do that, based on the delusional system that society had created at that time, it needed me to be mentally ill. That's what society desperately needed. So it used all its false stories and all the negative things that it made up about me to try to make it seem as if I would have had a mental health issue. And that was done through more false stories. So overall, we have a list of theories of false stories that portray negative behavior, criminal behavior, and some of them portray a behavior that is strongly associated with mental health issues. What happened next is extremely simple. One corrupt psychologist saw me and had 2 or 3 meetings with me and wrote false information in the report based on the false stories that society made up, and concluded that I would have had a mental health issue. Then that report was given to the court, and it was reviewed without anyone seeing me, and then it was used in the creation of a legal act, a legal series of actions that violated my fundamental human rights, and all that it did was save criminals that committed crimes against me and sentence me based on the crimes that I'd been falsely accused of, despite the fact that I could have proven my innocence from day one. Now, there are a few key elements that are related to this topic. However, the main one consists of the causative element. So, what is an absolute fact is that I showed 0 signs of mental illness when I talked to that mental health professional. So I went there and he heard everything that I said, and he had evidence, he had access to evidence, and he saw the evidence that everything that I said was correct. And he talked to me, and I was logical and built my answers properly and showed 0 signs of mental health issues. Luckily, at the time, I was recording the entire school days. I wasn't specifically recording this psychologist. I didn't think of that, but since I recorded the entire school days and I visited the psychologist during school hours, I also recorded the meetings that I had with him. And that is why I now have proof that I showed absolutely 0 signs of mental health issues in my conversation, in my meeting with this mental health professional. The conversations, the audio version of the conversation is posted online. The explanation and the explanation of the meeting is also posted there, and everything is broken down, and it can be seen that I show absolutely 0 signs of mental health issues. That evidence doesn't change, it will always be there. Any mental health practitioner can verify this, and they will see that I show 0 signs of mental health issues. However, it is important to state what type of mental health issue this mental health worker made up. He made up the diagnosis of delusional disorder, and basically the things that I told him were correct, and he had the evidence to see that they were correct observations, but he refused to. He pretended that the evidence wouldn't exist, and then simply categorized my claims as a result of having delusional disorder. So if you listen to that audio recording out of context, and you categorize it out of context, it is possible in theory to argue that the existence of such a condition could be possible, but not to diagnose it as 100%, and not even close to 100%, because I show 0 signs of mental illness. I simply state some facts that shut up. You keep making noises. It's past midnight, whatever. They won't let me do my presentation anyway. Where was I? So these observations. First, there are 0 signs of mental illness present in the actual meeting. And on top of that, the claims that the psychologist categorized as signs of mental illness should not be categorized as signs of mental illness in any scenario. However, out of context, the possibility of them being the result of mental illness exists, but only if verified, because the claims could be true. And in my case, the claims were 100% true, and the psychologist knew that the claims were 100% true, the entire school knew, but he still wrote down that that these claims are the result of mental health issues, and potentially wrote false information in that report, which can be exposed with these recordings. Moreover, back to the main point of this video presentation, the disinformation tactic used. So the claims of people that were made behind my back, without anyone ever confronting me about them, presented negative behavior, presented criminal behavior, presented behavior that was so extreme, and not necessarily extreme, but so deviated so much from the accepted social norms that it could have been considered a result of mental illness, since it did not match with my behavior this exhibited throughout the rest of my life. So indeed, from an external point of view, without having any other access besides these false stories, the content of these false stories, it is possible to argue that the result, which in this case outcome B, represents these stories, right? So some stories state that I stole stuff, others state that I beated people up and sexually assaulted them, others to present sexual harassment of other kind. So there are all sorts of false stories there. All of them are negative. So they have a negative aspect to them. Some of them have an aspect that allow the existence of mental health issues as the causative element of these actions. Now, all these stories, all this information that comes from these false stories is the outcome. This is outcome B. And the existence of that information can be caused by multiple factors. So one of them, indeed, let's say element A, is that I would have had a mental health issue, and as a result of having that issue, I would have actually said and done all those things. That is one option. That is element A. Element C is that people lied. Everybody lied, and then this information is false. The existence of the information in the community and outside of the community, so the existence of the information is the same, because the same information exists. There are claims that Paul did and said those things. So the outcome stays the same, but the causative element is different, because the existence of that information is not caused by Paul actually saying and doing all these things, but by people making those things up. And there are other possible reasons as well. These are the main ones. So I claim that C is correct, that everybody lied. And the people who lied, society, claims that A is correct. So now, the next logical step is to verify these claims. So to do that, going to a psychologist was a perfect option, because a psychologist can confirm, yes, you do have a mental illness, or no, you do not. But there's another option. The psychologist is corrupt, and he pretends that you do have a mental health issue when you do not. And that is what happened. So A was convenient to society. So society decided that A is true. And government is part of society, the psychologist is part of society, because that is how this environment was created, but that's a secondary topic. However, everybody was conditioned to want A to be true, because A was convenient to everybody. Because everybody had done something negative toward me. So A was convenient. Option A was convenient to absolutely everybody. So everybody tried to make that option reality. However, there is proof that A was wrong. I never had a mental health issue. And then there is the proof. So I went to a meeting with a psychologist and I recorded it and I posted it online, including the transcript. And there is clear evidence that I showed absolutely no sign of mental illness. Not only did I not show any sign of psychotic mental illness, I did not show a sign of mental illness at all. Absolutely nothing. So that is not debatable, that is a fact, and the evidence is out there and it can be verified at this very moment. So I seen a psychologist. The psychologist claimed that I do have a mental health issue, even though it was clear that I did not. And that report that he made was used to make the illegal legal processes a reality. It legalized, well, at least in the context of society's delusional system, because in reality, in absolutely all scenarios, those legal processes are void according to the law. They violate my fundamental human rights. But in society's version of reality, in its delusional system, in its delusional bubble, they pretend that if I would be mentally ill, those legal processes would be legal. And I'm exposing this right now. The only piece of evidence that society has is a report made by a psychologist in the context in which the recording of that meeting is posted online and it proves that I showed zero signs of mental health issues. And the explanation of this is also in that audio recording, written as a report after or during the. So there is the audio and there is the written report that I made, in which I expose the corruption of that mental health worker. So there is definitive proof that that report is false. Now, what was the reason for writing, for creating a mental health issues? The reason was outcome B. That meeting had zero effect on the report. The meeting showed a perfectly healthy person stating observations that were 100% true. In the context in which I provided proof that the mental health worker saw, and he had evidence, he had access to evidence, to all those false stories, which confirmed that the observations that I made were correct. So I showed zero signs of mental health issues. But he used those false stories that were made up behind my back to argue that I would have had a mental health issue, which was wrong, and I will explain why. From the moment that I showed zero signs of mental health issues, A was no longer an option. The only way in which society could have argued that this option still existed, the presence of a mental health issue, was to verify to verify the reason behind this, behind the outcome, behind the controversial information. And the only way to do that was to confront me about the false stories. And what would have happened, I would have proved my innocence regarding both criminal accusations and all other stories. And there's nothing to debate. It doesn't matter how many people claim that these stories were true, because series of false stories are exactly that, a series of multiple false stories that support the same core behavioral patterns or the same initial false story. So someone makes something up and then other people make other things up to support it. There are many disinformation tactics to do that. Some people made up negative things and then other people made up non-existent apologies in my name in order to make the initial false aberration seem real. Other people made up the same aberration multiple times. The same behavioral patterns that I never exhibited were present in multiple different false stories in order to create the illusion that I would exhibit those behavioral patterns, and so on. So there was an entire delusional system built within the community and the secondary communities around that main community, and it all became viral. And that is different, that is a secondary topic. However, back to my point, no one had the right to decide whether or not those stories were true or false without confronting me, because in theory, everyone could have lied. So to argue that mental health issues were behind the existence of that controversial information was illogical in the context in which I showed zero signs of mental health issues. And that is proven. The evidence of that, the only time when I saw a mental health worker, I only saw one mental health worker at the time, and in all my meetings with him, which I all recorded and posted online, I showed zero signs of mental health issues. Therefore, the legal processes are 100% void and illegal anyway. Even in the context of society's delusional bubble in which it pretends that series of legal processes would be legal if I would be mentally ill, when in reality, those series of legal processes are illegal anyway. But even in the context of that psychotic bubble that society created, I can still prove that the legal processes are illegal. The evidence is already online. So now, the only question is, that mental health worker had the option to confront me about outcome B. He could have said, people said this about you, is that true? And how can you defend yourself? And then I would have provided the proof that I was innocent. But he did not do that. He purposely decided not to verify that information because that was convenient. Decided that A is true, even though all evidence that existed completely contradicted A. So then the only option in which A could have still been proven was to confront me about why this existed, and to get to the bottom of the situation, to understand what the root cause of outcome B was. And I would have proven to the greatest possible extent that 100% of people lied and that C was true. And I can still do that right now. And here is the hypocrisy of modern humanity, at least in the context of this phenomenon. Right now, there is evidence that the report of the psychologist is void, that it contains false information. It is proven. There is evidence that is posted online which proves that I showed zero signs of mental health issues, which means that the legal processes are 100% illegal. Because they were only made possible with this document in order for them to be created behind my back without my knowledge. But even in this scenario, they're still illegal and void because they violate my fundamental human rights, but nothing is accepted. Society barricaded it. Society locked itself in its psychotic bubble, in a convenient psychotic bubble in which it rejects the existence of its crimes and atrocities. And every time the truth is pushed inside that bubble, society becomes forever more psychotic to push it back out. Because it doesn't want to see it. It would do and say anything to keep the truth out of that psychotic bubble and to prevent me from proving everything, because it knows that the moment I'm confronted about everything, and the moment my fundamental human rights are returned, and the moment that justice is allowed to take place in court, I would prove absolutely everything. And that is it. And again, this proves it. That psychologist had the option of confronting me, but did not do that because it was not convenient. So let's use another example. Let's say someone goes to the doctor and they say, "Doctor, I'm smoking and I'm coughing. What's wrong with me?" And the doctor says, "Well, you are a smoker, so you have a 10 times greater chance of developing cancer. Sometimes when people develop cancer, they also cough in. And you are 50, 60 years old, which is when people usually develop cancer. So most of the people your age that develop cancer, and most people your age that are smokers and start coughing, do not develop cancer. Only 1% of them do. However, I diagnosed you with cancer. I could do additional tests and find out if you actually have cancer, but I do not want to. So here I'm giving you therapy for cancer. This medication will reduce your life expectancy and make your life a living hell, but you must take it because you do have cancer. There's a 1% chance that you have cancer, and I can test that and figure out if you truly have cancer. But I won't, because I don't want to. So as you could see, that is a psychotic thought process. It makes use of this disinformation tactic. When it is done on purpose, it is disinformation. When it is not done on purpose, well, it's a logical flaw. It could be the result of actual psychosis. However, in this case, it was done as a result of corruption and as a disinformation tactic in order to get to the desired outcome of a guilty society. So, again, what happened? I went into the office and I had a conversation with a mental health worker. I showed zero signs of mental illness, absolute zero. There was nothing that pointed towards mental health issues. All the observations that I made were correct, and the mental health worker had evidence that my observations were correct. Now, what did he do next? He used the information, here, outcome B, he used the information that was spread behind my back to claim that I would have had a mental health issue. Well, I did not show one sign of mental health issues. That is a psychotic thought process, that is disinformation, and it makes use of this tactic, and it makes his report 100% void. In this very moment, there is evidence out there that the report is void. What were his options? So he saw a perfectly healthy young person who made observations that were 100% correct. A person who presented logical thought processes. Once again, there were zero signs of mental health issues. However, he had controversial information, that is outcome B here, that appeared, that was stated behind my back, so I wasn't aware of it. So that information, he used it and said, because of that information, he must have a mental health issue. But it is wrong. That information could have been the result of multiple different causes. And one cause, that of having a potential mental health issue, was ruled out because I went in there and I showed zero signs of mental health issues. That means one thing and only one thing. Pretending that cause A would be true can only be the result of corruption. It is that simple. The only next logical step of that psychologist was to test how this information was created, how it was produced. He had to confront me about it. And if he did, I would have proven that all this information was the result of C, of everybody lying. Everybody lied, and that is how all this information was produced. He did not have the right to argue that A would have been true, to argue that I would have had a mental health issue in the context in which I went there and I showed zero signs of mental health issues. At the very least, he had to test that. He had to confront me about the controversial information, and only then make a conclusion. But if he had done that, I would have proven that all the information is the result of people having made it up. People made up that information. All that information is false. And that is it. Even in the context of the theft, in which they stole my phone and they sent some messages from my phone, it doesn't matter. I had the evidence to prove that they framed me. At least they tried to frame me. If the case would have gone to court, I would have proven that to the greatest possible extent. I can prove that right now, but I'm not allowed to because of that exact reason. Because everybody is guilty, and once I prove my innocence, I will prove everybody's guilt as well. And a guilty society, a guilty government, they don't want that. This is modern mass psychosis. The thought processes of that psychologist are illogical. They represent functional psychosis. That those thought processes are the result of society desperately trying to hold on tight to their convenient delusions, and they become forever more psychotic for that. Everybody does. And this is just one example. This is just one segment of society's delusional system. But the facts have been proven. I showed zero signs of mental health issues. The proof is out there, and it can be verified as many times as people wish. and this will be confirmed. I did not have a mental health issue. And the only reason why anyone could have argued in favor of that is this. B. The information that was produced behind my back without anyone ever confronting me. And if anyone claimed that they confronted me, they lied. And this was known back then because I said, I don't know anything that is going on and everybody lies. And I was 100% correct. And then what needed to happen and what still needs to happen is this. A confrontation. I have to be confronted with that information that is held hidden from me in order to prevent me from proving that all of it is false. And if this happens, I prove to the greatest possible extent that 100% of people lied and C was the correct option. But as far as this report is concerned, the psychologist did not have the right to argue that I could have possibly had a mental health issue. It is the same as with the smoker coughing. The smoker who's coughing and goes to the doctor. 99 out of 100 smokers who go to the doctor because they cough do not have cancer. And if a doctor tells you that you have cancer only because of that, they're no doctors. And they should not be allowed to be doctors. And their decision must be 100% void. And it is the same in this case. I went there and I proved that I was 100% mentally healthy. And that mental health worker who should not be allowed to be a mental health worker decided otherwise based on information that was produced behind my back without confronting me about that information while he had the opportunity to confront me about it. The only possible conclusion after I showed that I had no mental health issues was that there is another causative element for the existence of that information. And no one had the right to decide otherwise until I was confronted about it, which never happened. And that must happen now. That illegal deal, those are illegal processes that resulted in government interventions. Those legal processes represent a government intervention that targeted me and stripped me of some of my fundamental human rights. It should be an international emergency for that illegal deal, for that illegal processes, for that illegal government intervention to be 100% nullified. Completely. And justice must be allowed to take place in a court of law. There is nothing to debate. This is mass psychosis. Society and government are functionally psychotic because they want to bury the truth about their crimes and atrocities committed against me. So they pretend that I would be ill and that I would be guilty and that their dehumanization and horrifying series of irreparable injustices would have been justified. At least the 0.1% that society admits to. The truth is horrifying. And silence in this case is a crime. There is absolutely nothing to debate. If justice is allowed to take place in court today, I prove everything today. It is that simple. I was never mentally ill. This mental health worker lied. The legal processes, the illegal deal, illegal trial, and other legal processes that were held behind my back without my knowledge in my name are 100% void and must be nullified. The same applies to the 2021 government conspiracy. It is a similar psychotic thought processes that multiple branches of the government used and you did so in a premeditated manner to illegally detain me and torture to silence me because of the effects of this illegal deal from 2017. It was torture according to international law, and I can prove it in court today if justice is allowed to take place in court today. The same applies to all other segments of this delusional system, of this atrocity. If justice is allowed to take place today, I prove everything today. Silence is a crime, and that is meant literally in the context of this atrocity. There is nothing to debate. It has already been proven. The illegal deal is illegal, the illegal trial is illegal. All legal processes that took place behind my back without my knowledge are illegal, and they must be nullified. There is nothing to debate. Justice must be allowed to take place in a court of law. This is mass psychosis, because a guilty society and a guilty government do not want to admit to their atrocities. It is that simple. The only obstacle to obtaining justice is the criminal ego of society. It does not want to admit what it is, based on its actions, based on its criminal actions, based on its psychopathic behavior, psychopathic intentions, and the horrifying consequences of its crimes. There is nothing to debate. There's nothing to vote for. I must have my fundamental human rights returned. The deal is illegal for multiple reasons. It violates my fundamental human rights. It has already been proven. There's nothing to debate. Silence is a crime. I was never mentally ill, and it has already been proven. There is nothing to debate. I must be confronted, and I will prove that all the information that can be used and that was used to argue that I would be mentally ill is false. All of it, 100%, and there's nothing to debate. It is that simple. It is the greatest disinformation campaign of the modern free world, and the greatest mass psychosis-like phenomenon in the history of the free world. And silence is a crime. To summarize this video, at least most of it, I presented two key disinformation tactics that society used throughout the years to create this delusional system and to support its convenient delusions. The first one comprised illogical generalization of specific aspects in order to support desired outcomes. So in the case presented, society wanted its desired outcome to be true. It wanted me to have a mental health issue even though I did not have one, so it made up the desired outcome. It fabricated the desired outcome, and then it searched my life for a causative element. And it did not find one. However, it found an element that increases the likelihood of developing mental health issues. And it exaggerated the extent to which that causative element results in actually developing a mental health issue. And it did that to the point where society's decisions and conclusions were illogical. They represented functional psychotic thought processes. The second disinformation tactic, which is right now on the board, consists of having a real outcome. So this time the outcome is real. It's something that exists and something that is proven, and changing the causative element. This disinformation tactic had been used over and over again throughout the years, and it applies to many different topics. In the one I presented, so on the board, there is a general structure of how it works. I presented a similar case regarding how society wanted its convenient delusion to be true, and it created a non-existent causative element, the mental illness that society so much desires me to have, even though I do not have, and argued that it would have been the causative element for the false information that was produced behind my back that targeted me. So as you can see on the board, that disinformation tactic consists of fabricating non-existent causative elements for an outcome that exists. And they do that, when people do that, they do that by rejecting the actual causative element and replacing it with whatever it is convenient to the specific group. And this, once again, this disinformation tactic has been applied over and over again to multiple topics, to multiple segments of society's delusional system. It is crucial that I presented the structure of how this works, and once again the solution to this is to allow direct confrontation to take place, and once that happens there is no more disinformation. It is simply common sense, my evidence, society's evidence, and a fair fight to obtaining justice and proving the truth. And I'm telling you one thing extra on top of this summary of what has been presented in this video. I'm telling you that someone who wants a direct confrontation usually can win the confrontation. In my case, I want a direct confrontation. I want justice to be allowed to be obtained in court because I can prove everything. And in contrast, when someone does not want that to happen, it is because it will be inconvenient to them. And guess what? Society does everything possible, including breaking the law and violating my fundamental human rights in an extreme manner in order to prevent that confrontation from taking place. I wonder why.